So I saw this tweet here by Andrew Russell, and it made me think, how bad is this offensive line this year for the Cincinnati Bengals? And I'll be honest with you, you already know on this channel, when we ask that question, we get the answers. So let's start off right away with taking a look at our three different categories. We have the Bengals offensive line. We have O-lines versus the Bengals, which is, of course, every single week so far. And then the Giants offensive line. We'll say, why the Giants offensive line in this list? Well, they're technically ranked the worst offensive line in the league as of right now. So that's why they're in here. It's not just me wanting to trash them. They do that for themselves. Real fast, guys. I apologize if I sound weird. I have like this bump in my mouth and it hurts like heck to talk right now for some reason. But I want to give a public service announcement here. Make sure you check on your local Giants fans, because as much as we think we're down bad, they're down 100 times worse. Alright, so starting off right away, week 1, okay? The best offensive lineman we had week 1 versus the Browns was Alex Kappa. 66.2. Pass rush rate, which means how much pass rushes they allowed to get through them to the quarterback, is at 3.6% week 1. Lana Brown was 57 pass blocker grade with a 5.4%, getting after Joe Burrow. Jonah Williams, 52.8, 5.4% pass rush rate. Ted Karras, 37.3 with a 3.6 pass rushing rate. And Cordell Volson, 27.4 with a 3.6% getting after our quarterback. And the problem with week 1, right, is look at the Browns' offensive line. 0, 0, 0. 3 out of the 5 guys allowed 0 pressures from our defensive line getting after Deshaun Watson. That's a problem. Their left tackle allowed 5.4% and their center allowed 4.1%. But still rated almost higher than every one of our offensive linemen we've had that week 1 performance. Now for the test group, the New York Giants coming here versus Dallas Cowboys. Their right guard marked in as a 1. Count it, a 1 for pass blocker grade. And allowed 12.9% pass rushing rate. Their right tackle, 25.7. And they allowed 11.4. That Giants, again, please go make sure you check on your Giants friends, because holy crap, I feel bad for them. That has to be some type of record. That really does. They lost 40-0, and I feel bad that we lost. But then I look at them and I say, wow, they don't even have guys blocking at that point. Alright, week 2. Orlando Brown led the charge against the Ravens with an 82.9 pass blocker grade. Actually, second. He did not lead the charge. Karras actually led the charge at 83.4 with a 0 pass rush grade allowed to get to Joe Burrow in that game. Orlando Brown was second with 82.9, 1.6% pass rush grade. Kappa third, 73.5 pass blocker grade, and a 1.6 pass rusher grade. Jonah Williams, 54.7 with a 3.3% getting after the quarterback. And yet again, Cordell Volson comes in last at a 32.4% grade with 3.3% getting after the quarterback. Now, comparing that to the Ravens, their center, who wasn't even their starting center, he was their backup center because Linderbaum got hurt for that game. He came in with an 83.3 pass blocker grade in that game with a 0% pass rush rate against the Ravens there. Zeitler also came in here, 62.9 with a 1.3% there. And then Morgan Moses also 1.3% at a 69.9. Really, only guy that struggled for them was their rookie John Simpson. Other than that, everyone else on the offensive line did pretty dang good against us that day. I mean, our line did pretty okay too, but definitely a problem. Now, looking at the Giants, they actually play the Cardinals week 2, the team we're about to play. And the Cardinals don't really have that crazy of a pass rush. So, because of that, they were able to actually do pretty good. Their line actually was very, a lot better than week 1, I would say. And they were able to actually block for Daniel Jones. So, overall, the craziest thing was the right tackle, Evan Neal, who a lot of people are trashing on social media. There's a reason why, because he is getting destroyed. I mean, if you look at I hate to skip forward here, guys, but you can see week 2 was his best performance. Week 3, 6.4% allowed, and then week 4, 9.3% allowed. I mean, for comparison, that's the most on this chart completely, except for, his other Giants offensive teammates. So let's now get into week 3. We have the Rams. This is where Jonah Williams allowed 0% pass rusher getting after Joe Burrow in that game with a 67.3 passer grade. Alex Cappa with 57.7 with a 3.9% get after Joe. Orlando Brown a 43.1 with 5.19% getting after Joe. Teddy Karras 41.7 with 3.9 getting after Joe. And yes, Cordell Volson actually recorded a 0. Pro Football Focus has him in the books as a 0 for his grade in that game. 6.5% allowing to get after Joe versus the Rams. And this is why every single time, I said it before and I say it again, every single time they didn't double Aaron Donald, Donald went right to Volson and went one-on-one with him. And every single time he got destroyed. Every single time. For the Rams offensive line, their right guard also got 0 and actually allowed 11.6% pass rusher win rate against us, and that's why we had 6 sacks in that game. 5.5 for the left guard. They did have 3.6 for the right tackle. And also, again, the right guard did have a 0 too. Now, for the New York Giants, this is when they played the 49ers. And you can see, I mean, holy crap, those numbers are horrendous. 11.7% pass rusher grade. Pass blocking grade. The left guard, 3.8. The right guard, 3.9. I mean, that is probably the worst offensive line we saw in a single week. Now, they did go against the 49ers. 49ers have a great, defensive line, so it's not surprising. But their left tackle allowed 8%, left guard 10%, right guard 6%, and right tackle 6.4%. Now, our final week, which was last week when we did play the Tennessee Titans. Last week, Orlando Brown led the team with a 78.2% with a 5.7% pass rusher grade. Pass rushing after quarterback. Jonah Williams was second at 71.8 with an 8.6%. Karras was 58.6 with a 5.7%. Cordell Volson, yet again, having an awful game. 37.6 with 8.6%. And then Alex Cappa, 36.4 with 5.7%. For the Titans, we actually did pretty dang well versus their offensive line, considering everything being said with them running the ball so efficiently. Because actually, surprisingly enough, their offensive line, for the most part, which is already not the greatest, it did struggle. I mean, on paper, it did struggle. Their left guard was 36.7%. Their center was 26 grade. I see saying percent, but 36.7 grade. Center was 26 grade. 58.4 for the right guard and 63.1 for the right tackle. The problem is, while their grades were awful because, they weren't doing that great in the game, because of the run, the pass rush rate isn't really that high. I mean, yes, their left guard was crazy at 6.4%, right guard at 4.5%, but other than that, 1.52, 4.5, and 3.07. Now, that Monday night game versus Seattle for the Giants, they gave up a 5.3% pass rushing grade, 2.5, 3.13, 5.3, and 9.3. They actually got sacked. They allowed 11 sacks in that game. I think it was 12 sacks, actually. 12 sacks in that game the Giants allowed. So, just a little, quick comparison there. So, going back to the original tweet we had pulled up here, Andrew Russell said the guards are killing us, right? The guards are a problem. Volson is a problem, okay? 100% Volson every single week is seeming to be our biggest problem. I will say Kappa, week 1 was actually our best offensive lineman, surprisingly enough, so I don't really think that, he was that much of a problem in all honesty. Obviously, week 2, he wasn't the greatest, but he was still very serviceable. Week 3, definitely kind of mid, not really that great, and kind of went downhill. And then week 4, yes, he was our biggest problem in week 4. So, what's the takeaway here, right? Because obviously, what should we do? How should we fix this? Well, there's more reason why when we got rid of, La'el Collins, right now is looking like he's about to come back. He's fully healthy now. He's trying to sign with other teams. He has a lot of teams that are interested in him. It just makes it no sense why we got rid of him. It really doesn't. Because at the end of the day, you look at these grades, you look at these numbers, and you watch the games, and you're like, wow. Like, we need as much help as we can humanly get, on this team. Because, listen, this offensive line is definitely part of the problem when it comes. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in here real fast, like the actual, colors to show, how bad our offensive line was. But yes, this offensive line is definitely the reason, one of the reasons why this offense is not getting going. Obviously, yes, there is problems outside this offensive line with play calling, and obviously Joe Burrow's injury. But week 1 we had 1 green. Week 2 we had 3 green. Week 3 against the Rams we had 0 green. Week 4 we had 2 green. So it's a problem, and there's no easier way to put that other than the fact that I don't know what we're going to do, because you're not going to get rid of Volson right now unless you go out there and you trade for a guard and then try to say, hey, Volson, you're just not the guy. But then you have no backup, right? You have no guy that can really replace Volson at this moment in time. You could have made the argument that maybe you put Collins at left guard, but then you got rid of Collins. So it's like, when Zach Taylor is trying to figure out what the problem is, there's a lot of problems. And only good thing is, hopefully, the Cardinals, we can get through the Cardinals because their defensive line isn't that crazy. But, you got to do something. Free agency, trade block, something at this point. Because it's not cutting it with Volson, at least Volson at left guard. If you're not going to replace anybody else, because I still think Cap was really great. I think, Jonah's getting the job done. Jonah really is our bright spot. Like, week 1... he's an orange. Week 2, week 2 was actually horrendous versus the Ravens. He was a red. Week 3, he was an orange. A yellow. He was a yellow, red, yellow, green. So he's actually, not that horrendous. Orlando Brown has been kind of wishy-washy, but he's not that horrendous. Really, the biggest problem here is, honestly, Volson. He's the, repeat offender here as being the biggest problem throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. And I get it, he's young, and I've been the biggest fan of him, supportive of him this offseason, and I want to continue, but I'm sorry, I cannot keep supporting this guy, because I know he's young, I know he has to develop, I know he was a former, second round pick, but at some point, we gotta win games. At some point, you gotta protect Joe. And if that means going out there and trading for a left guard, that means going out there and trading for a left guard. Because this right here is not going to get the job done. I promise you that this is not going to get the job done. Tell me down below your thoughts and opinions. I'll see you guys next one.